Our photojournalist Greg Marinovich documented the massacre in his book, Murder at the Small Koppie. In it, he details the history of Lonmin and South Africa's mining industry. He's also doubtful that the Marikana victims will ever achieve the justice they seek, but is hoping his work might help to, at the very least, expose some of those truths. He joins me now from the United States, where he's heading a photojournalism unit at Boston University. Greg, good evening. It's a pleasure to have your news at Prime tonight. Your work has been crucial, especially in challenging the narrative of what exactly unfolded in Marikana on the Koppie that day. Retrospectively, when you look back, did you ever think that it would be as significant as it has become?
Oh yeah, when the massacre happened, it was obvious that this was a huge and terrible moment in our history, especially post-apartheid. We didn't expect this kind of behavior from a democratic police and a democratic state.
Sure. And when you look at the work that journalists like yourself were able to do, how important was it in challenging the narrative, especially that from the police officers, over why there was the opening of live ammunition on that day and who it had been targeted at?
So it's quite complicated. I know I shouldn't start by saying that, but really the interweaving of police and official spokesmen and National Union of Mine Workers and ANC and government lies was quite critical to the way that the massacre went down. There was a build-up to it that tried to throw a different narrative to the South African public. And when the massacre happened, the lies came out of police spokesmen's mouths immediately. They didn't acknowledge there were two massacres. In fact, the one where miners were hunted down at Small Koppie, where they were trying to run away and hide. So really, it was essential to uncover these things, but it's so difficult because so many journalists and so many of our public want to hear from official sources, and they take the word of official sources over that of miners and people who've experienced these things at first hand. It's a problem.
What role do you think that some of the things that you were able to document with your camera, what role did that play, especially when we look at something like the Farlam Commission of Inquiry?
So really my work as a photographer was very minor in this investigation. It was really about getting people's stories and trying to find evidence and linking stuff together. And the pictures were really, the only part they played was a kind of forensic part in showing where people had been killed, especially at the second massacre site, which showed any reasonable person that they could never have been a threat, where they were killed in little clefts between rocks, trying to hide from police hunting them down.
And part of what those also sought to do was almost complete the pieces of the puzzle so that the story of Marikana can be understood in its entirety. Do you think that we've been able to do that 8 years on, to fully know the truth of what happened that day?
So I think between journalism, investigators, and especially what came out in the Farlam Commission, despite the obvious attempts by many people to obscure what happened, the amazing work by the investigators, by NGOs working with miners, by the miners' lawyers, most of the truth has come out. What we don't know is some of the motivation and who gave these orders behind the scenes. And that runs deep. And the fact that this will only come out once these people have been charged kind of reflects badly on us as a society, because none of the police from the 16th of August have been charged. Some of them from the 13th of August, where there was a clash between police and miners, some of those police and some of those miners have been charged, but they haven't been brought to court. COVID's an excuse. 8 years down the line, I don't know. But it's really, once you get people who did the shooting and were involved in the shooting on the stand, accused of murder, they will turn against that blue line and tell the truth of what happened and what their instructions and orders were.
And certainly one of the things that you were able to do in your own book was to be able to really analyze the rate of inequality which existed, not just between the community and the mine boss and the mine itself, but just the various, you know, almost intersections of power and labor that were at play.
I mean, that's the cause of the strike. That's the cause of the terrible inequality in South Africa and I guess around the world, but especially in South Africa. And, you know, these are prime jobs. Having a job as a Lonmin miner is the South African middle class. Yet every month at about halfway, they would go to the mashonisa to get a loan, you know, to see it through for the month because so few people have jobs that unless you're in the elite, your salary isn't enough to carry all your family members and those who are reliant on you. It's a trap.
And I wonder, you know, when you look back and you also look at the role that you identified of mines and of trade unions rather, and the role that they play in mining communities in particular, do you think there were any lessons that stood out for you that this country should and can be learning from?
So the mine unions, and NUM especially, was critical to bringing democracy to South Africa. But slowly, NUM and its leadership moved away from representing the lowest workers, the people they should be representing. And in fact, what I uncovered in part of the investigation was that the top mine officials, all the NUM officials were being paid by the mines, not by union dues. And they were being paid executive salaries. So to whom did their loyalty lie? And when I revealed this, there was a terrible outcry by NUM, and I was attacked endlessly on social media. But these are facts. And if we can't have the people who represent us as honest brokers, we're in big trouble. NUM's not the only one. They're amongst many. But this is part of this, when capitalism reaches the stage where it's really for the few and the rest are pressed down and just there to serve the others' needs. It's a real problem in society.
And pressed down not just as a means of how the economics of the day play themselves out, but also through the use of violence and the use of force. And I know that that's an issue that you've covered over, you know, your career as a photojournalist. Are we changing there in terms of how the state uses violence in times of conflict?
I mean, sadly, no, not in the least. You know, there were so many commissions and inquiries into police action during Marikana, never mind apartheid, and you look at Boipatong and all these other terrible incidents in the 90s and 80s and 60s, never mind. There's a culture of police impunity, and the government supports the police, whichever government it is. Who would have thought 25 years ago that an ANC government would allow Marikana to happen and there to be no repercussions against anyone? It's impossible to believe that, but there it is.